Something I Didn't Choose really sets the tone for this entire collection. It sees the ups and downs of a relationship. It tackles long distance relationships and how sometimes they can work and sometimes you just need a bit of time apart to come back together. It was a way for me to express these intense feelings that I was feeling. It was truly something that I didn't choose to feel. I wrote Something I Didn't Choose about 4 or 5 years ago, and it was the very first time I ever dabbled in poetry. Happy Place is based off of that feeling you get when you look at someone and they're your kryptonite, they're your medicine, like they can pull you out of any dark situation. They really do. They're your guiding light. They're almost like your anchor and your lighthouse. The one person that keeps you going no matter what is going on in life. If you've got them around, you're going to be happy, you're going to be able to get through it. And that's really what this whole poem encapsulates, is that feeling of one person being the one thing that brings you pure happiness in this world. And no matter how far you go to try and find a greater happiness, you'll never find it because they are your source of happiness. They are your happy place. Lips on Mine. What can I say about Lips on Mine? Well, I feel like it says it all, really. Lips on Mine started one night, laid in bed, and just looking at the lips of the person that you love and going, fuck, like, I just want to kiss you, I want to do everything with you. The rest of this poem kind of came about after that relationship had ended, and it became, what started off as sheer lust and devotion became a poem about desires and things that I was missing out on in life, exploring that sexual side and almost that sexual liberation. And Lips on Mine is very much a poem I'm quite anxious to put out, but do you know what? I'm so glad I wrote it. Everyone should feel comfortable to be sex positive and talk about everything that they want and need from a relationship. You Couldn't Make This Up really felt like the right title for this project, and this title track poem really encapsulates when shit hits the fan. It's that disbelief of, what am I going through? This can't be reality. Like, it's the sheer confusion of, it's like someone's writing your life for you and you're going, this can't be happening, like you couldn't make this up, this can't be my reality. It actually came to me more in a sonic way. It was more of like a chorus and then it had verses, which is a different style of writing for me, something completely different. And that's why it's the perfect title track for this collection, because honestly, you couldn't make any of this up. This is all a brutally honest story, and I'm so proud of this track in particular. One Last Try for me was that mind frame of not wanting to let go of what was so good at that time. It's that never knowing of, could it work? Could we get through this? Could we get through to the other side? How will we know unless we give it one last try? Maybe you've already tried to work through some things, but it's not quite worked out, but you don't want to give up hope. And for me, One Last Try, for the majority of it, really is a hopeful poem that things can go back to how they were. But then there's that realisation towards the end of One Last Try that if things go back to the way they were, then it's not working. And it's the beginning of the turn in my mind frame that maybe this is for the best, but still not quite wanting to believe that. Pop Song is one of my favourites on this entire collection. For me, Pop Song is about how when you go through intense heartbreak, you suddenly hear things in music differently. And I think a lot of us, when we go through something tough in our lives, we turn to music to get us through. And for me, I certainly did that. And I found songs all of a sudden just made so much more sense. And I hated that. I hate the fact that some of these songs that I was just singing and loving suddenly hit different and hurt. One of my favourite parts about this poem is the play on some song titles that really got me through. You've got the Adele in there, you've got the Olivia Rodrigo, and those songs really got me through. And I think for me, Pop Song is definitely a standout favourite of mine in this whole collection. Infidelity does what it says on the tin. It talks about a lack of loyalty in a relationship and the heartbreak that it causes, and it battles with the, do we turn a blind eye in the pursuit of appeasement? It really tackles the shock of finding out about infidelity. Even though we've both done wrong in this relationship, it's the different degrees of infidelity, and it really tackles that. And I think the best way to describe it is and it's one of my favourite parts about this poem. The metaphor of a leopard and a cheetah really was the best way for me to describe my mind frame and the justification I felt for what had happened and the justification for the hurt that I was feeling as well. Infidelity really is the most emotional poem on this entire collection, and I think in that sense it is one of my favourites, but boy, was it hard to write and even talk about. But yeah, I'm really proud of Infidelity. The irony. A sad story for me really is that first glimpse of acceptance throughout this collection, and I'm kind of just seeing it for what it is, and accepting that my emotions are valid. It's okay to be sad about this. I think it's the perfect way to encapsulate that it's okay to not be okay. That validation I was giving to myself when writing this poem really helped me get through. It was a complete life-changing moment for me, and it's okay to be sad about that, because 10 years down, when you tell this story, people are going to go, man, that is a sad story. And it is. But coming through the other side, you see a bit of a glimpse of acceptance, and the journey for the future to a happy ending begins to be laid out in this poem. Moving on really kicks off the final chapter of this collection. I wrote this when I thought I'd done it. I thought I'd gotten through to the other side. Yet I was still hung up. I would still see things and hear their name. Things would pop up and I would just still be really sad about it. But I was adamant that I'd moved on. And this poem is ironic in its title because it's about moving on, but the reality is I haven't quite moved on at this point. And it's that kind of admission to myself that I may not be there yet, but it'll come along. I wrote it and I was like, yes, I've moved on. And then I read it back and I was like, wow, I am still so bitter. I am so not over this yet. The irony is, part of moving on is thinking you have, but you haven't. And that's why this poem is so important that it's on there and it kicks off this grand final chapter of this collection. We all get to that stage where we think we're there, but we're really not. And that's all a part of moving on. Run is about when you lose someone in your life, and it doesn't just have to be a boyfriend, girlfriend. It can be a family member. It can be a best friend that you no longer have communication with. What I love about Run is that acknowledgement of you can't hide and run away from your past. Your past has defined you, made you the strong person you are today. And it was that inner maturity that I found where just because this relationship hasn't worked out doesn't mean I have to block it out like it doesn't exist. And I don't want to run away from that. And it's almost like a love letter to the person you're no longer in touch with, to say, it's okay that we didn't work out, but let's not pretend like it didn't happen. We may not get on or talk anymore, but for better or worse, we were a part of each other's life. And I'd like to think that that time we spent together really was quite defining. And I really don't think we need to run away from that. Honestly, it was originally the last poem on this collection. I generally thought that it was going to be the big finale of that realization of self-worth and empowerment and truly being honest with yourself that sometimes you do deserve more. You don't have to sacrifice so much in a relationship. When I wrote Honestly, I was in such a clear mind frame of I really wanted this whole collection to be on a path to self-love and doing things for me finally and being freedom. I'd gotten used to the idea of being single at this point, and I was so happy in where I was in life that honestly I felt amazing. It really felt like the perfect end to this story. But in reality, and if I was being truly honest with myself, there was one more. Who knew when I wrote this, that's when I really knew this story that I was telling was done. It's the final chapter. It was that final aha moment of I am now thriving, and it was that kind of realization in my mind of who knew I could do this, and it was that shock of wow, not only have I gotten through this, but I've come out a much stronger, happier, healthier, lighter person because of all of this. The minute I wrote this, I knew this collection was done, and that's when I got excited about this, because this whole collection didn't start off in this journey that it was. It started off as a heartbreak collection. It was going to be all about sadness and misery and heartbreak. And when I wrote Who Knew, it was that moment when I looked back at all of these poems that I'd written over the last 5 years. It told such a great story, one that you couldn't make up.